Welcome to Primetime Weekend. I'm Nicole Wallace. Let's get right to the week's top stories. In the study of criminal minds, it's actually not uncommon for an arsonist to knowingly return to the scorched earth he or she so brazenly torched to admire his or her work. What is uncommon, though, is the arsonist not just being applauded by the victims upon his return to the scene of the crime, but being celebrated. Today, Donald Trump played the arsonist, and the Trump-run Republican Party showcased a version of this phenomenon. Meeting separately with House and then Senate Republicans this afternoon, 3 blocks from where Trump was arraigned last year in connection with his efforts to overturn the 2020 election he lost, Trump's trip to Washington, D.C. today amounted to equal parts chest-thumping, America bashing, and more bizarre, incoherent ramblings about dating Nancy Pelosi and the GOP convention host city. The press spin for today was that Trump would engage in forward-looking discussions of policy, but Hannibal Lecter kept coming up, as well as Trump's obsessive animosity toward the Department of Justice. Politico reports this, that the immediate aftermath of his 34 felony count in New York, in that period, Trump sought to harness the powers of Congress to fight on his behalf. His first call was to, you guessed it, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. Now, Trump's henchmen, many of whom made a show of appearing in their matching red ties in court last month, they're mobilizing, not to pass any laws to help the American people, but in an all-out effort to protect Trump, to help him evade accountability. Republican lawmakers are trying everything. They're being really creative, drawing up bills on jurisdiction, weaponizing appropriations, and expanding blockades on President Joe Biden's appointees. While Republicans do everything except govern, everything in their power to help Trump evade accountability, avoid the rule of law, remember, they didn't always bow quite this low at Donald Trump's feet.
We're on the verge of having someone take over the conservative movement and the Republican Party who's a con artist.
Donald, you're a sniveling coward, and leave Heidi the hell alone.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. I've tried to be helpful.
We were really trying hard to figure out how do we hold a president accountable that put all of our lives at risk.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
All those people are engaged in a project to make you think that we're crazy. They said those things. They said those things, and then they fell into line. Democrats, for their part, today welcomed Trump to Capitol Hill in a very different way. This mobile billboard, for instance, sent out by the Democratic National Committee, had video from the deadly insurrection playing on a loop to remind the GOP what exactly happened on January 6th, what exactly they've endorsed for president in 2024. 3.5 years later, the blood has been cleaned up, the broken glass has been swept away, the physical damage repaired, but the disgrace and the trauma for the men and women of law enforcement who protected the Republicans and the Democrats that day endures. In fact, Donald Trump was protected this afternoon by some of the very same police officers and law enforcement officials who bravely stood between his violent supporters and those Republican lawmakers who rolled out the red carpet for him today. This is well and truly the Trump Republican Party. So we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. With me at the table, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard is back. Also joining us, former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy, and the executive director of Republican Voters Against Trump, the publisher of The Bulwark, Sarah Longwell. Sarah, I start with you because I think only your pain matches or maybe exceeds mine at what all these men and women have become. Because I was never on board, right? I never thought Trump was a good idea. It's divided circles of former friends, divided family and friends and neighbors. I mean, I've always thought it was a bet with the devil. But I guess the point in that match is so did they. So did Ted Cruz. So did Marco Rubio. So did Nancy Mace. So did Mitch McConnell. But they did something very different today. Do you understand why?
Do I understand why they're doing it? I mean, no, I can't, because I'm like you, right? I mean, I both thought Trump was unfit from the beginning and took people like Marco Rubio and so many of the other candidates in 2016, Ted Cruz, doesn't matter. Everybody was on our side back then. J.D. Vance, they all thought the exact same way we did. Some of them called themselves Never Trumpers like us. And then we watched them for political expediency, for their own professional growth, not only tolerate Trump, make common cause with him, but celebrate him, become his biggest lickspittles and toadies. And there's something particularly painful, I think, about them cheering him as he returns to the Capitol, where, as Nancy Mace said, he threatened their lives. And one of the things that strikes me, I run this group, Republican Voters Against Trump, and one of the number one reasons that people who voted for Trump twice say that they will not vote for him again is because he lied about the results of the election, saying that it was stolen, and then he fomented an insurrection. And for a lot of these Republicans, that was their red line. That was the end of it for them. And the fact that these people are now willing to make videos, put their faces on billboards saying, absolutely not, Trump's unfit, I won't vote for him. They have the courage to do that. They're willing to make that case. But members of Congress, people who purport to be devout Christians, who purport to back the blue, who purport to stand for the rule of law, they're there to cheer Donald Trump, the guy who was morally and temperamentally responsible for the insurrection. It is stomach churning and it is gaslighting. It is the kind of emperor has no clothes kind of phenomenon where it is just important on days like this that we remind people we are not the crazy ones. They are the craven ones.
Oh, I love that. And lickspittle is a word that isn't in enough circulation. Thank you for invoking it here at the top of the hour. I want to show you an ad that the Biden campaign put out and just get your reaction to sort of its salience. This is on January 6th.
On January 6th, Donald Trump lit a fire in this country.
140 officers were injured. The siege lasted for 7 hours.
Stoking the flames of division and hate. Now he's pouring gasoline.
They were unbelievable patriots.
Pledging to pardon the extremists who tried to overthrow our government.
We will give them pardons.
Inciting them to try again. There is nothing more sacred than our democracy. But Donald Trump's ready to burn it all down.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
I mean, Sarah, this was released today. Trump has actually gone farther. He's called them warriors around the anniversary of D-Day. This seems to speak to that gut rejection of some of the voters that you talk to a lot. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think this is good. I think you have to keep the salience of January 6th very high for voters, because the fact is, people have short attention spans. I do the focus groups multiple times a week. I talk to voters all the time. And I've done focus groups now on shortly after January 6th happened, and then on the anniversary, sort of every year now for several years. And it's been stunning to watch people change how they talk about January 6th, because, of course, when it happened, people were disgusted. They were sad. They thought the events that Republicans were so appalled that they had to say that it was actually Antifa and Black Lives Matter, right? They weren't even willing at the time to say that these were actually Trump supporters because it was such a bad thing to happen. But they have moved to a place where as sort of time has healed some of those wounds for them. And they've been sort of by the right-wing infotainment media, by Republican politicians, they've kind of moved to this place now, not just of acceptance of what happened on January 6th, but of celebration, that this was an act of patriotism. But that is for core MAGA voters. And so for the swing voters who are still repelled by what happened that day, for the people who maybe aren't big fans of Joe Biden, but need to be reminded that Donald Trump is unfit and too dangerous to be allowed back in the White House, it is essential to remind them about January 6th, because it's just one of those things where it matters when people keep the salience high, but as the salience falls, people forget about it. So it's good to remind people.
Well, Tim, and I think our best example of how that worked, of what Sarah's talking about, was the January 6th Select Committee's public hearings were the summer before the midterms. And we learned after an election what was on voters' minds. But democracy was much higher than a lot of sort of pundits expected it to be. One of the factors, along with Dobbs, that helped blunt the audacious predictions of a massive red wave, which was more like a drip, drip. The facts of January 6th include Trump's voracious appetite for the violence. Let me play some of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony about Trump's enthusiasm for the removal of the mags, which are there for one reason, to make Secret Service aware of anyone carrying a weapon.
When we were in the offstage announce tent, I was part of a conversation. I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
This was always, to me, the smoking gun, if you will, of Trump's enthusiasm for his supporters to both be armed, to be among them, and that they proceed armed to the Capitol to do his bidding.
Right. Exactly right, Nicole. In addition to that clip from Cassidy in the hearings, we also developed this really powerful vignette of the January 5th, the evening before the attack on the Capitol. The president was in the Oval Office. He gathered a group of young staff, and the door was open, and he could hear the January 5th crowd, the Ali Alexander, Mike Flynn speeches. And he said to the room, people are very angry. They're extremely upset about this election, mindful of the energy in the crowd and the potential for it to turn violent. So there were repeated instances of his specific knowledge of danger and his desire to go. I mean, what struck me about these images from today is he's doing today what he wanted to do that day, right? His intention was to go to the Capitol and buttonhole Republican members of Congress somehow that he thought would be subject to the political pressure that he was exerting on the vice president and others, and some desperate attempt to prevent the certification and the transfer of power. It is shockingly ironic that 3.5 years later, he's making that trip, not on the day of the certification, but getting a much more favorable audience from these Republican members. That is precisely what he intended to do had he been successful in that crazy plan to travel to the Capitol on January 6th.
Vaughn, irony doesn't live under the sort of mushroom cloud of Trumpism, but there was an irony to Mike Johnson being the speaker who greeted Donald Trump on a day like today.
Right. I mean, having him be the one welcoming him, I think, is telling of this moment that we find ourselves. But also somebody like Nancy Mace inside of that meeting room today. Donald Trump explicitly giving her a shout out after helping her win her primary just this last week in South Carolina. Nancy Mace was, some of us were talking about going to be the future of the Republican Party in the days after the January 6th attack. She was voted in, rightfully, for the first time in November of 2020. And she then made the TV rounds saying that she and others could be the voice of the new Republican Party. They needed to turn the page, move away from Donald Trump. And then I was out there in South Carolina in 2022 that summer. Donald Trump was up on stage calling her a rhino, trying to get her eliminated from office. She narrowly won her reelection, and she even told me at the time, look, the Department of Justice is going to do their work, and they're going to find if anybody did a crime related to January 6th, then they will bring the appropriate charges. Well, the Department of Justice did exactly that, but Nancy Mace is speaking a different tune. And the message that was sent from Donald Trump to every other House Republican in that room was that you may have turned your back on me at one point, or you may cross me at some point, but ultimately you are safe in this Republican Party if you come back and you stand beside me. Nancy Mace is the representative of that. If you take those words of hers after January 6th, when she said that she was hiding her kids that day of the attack, to where she finds herself now in the summer of 2024.
There are a lot of accounts from contemporaneous sort of social media posts about the incoherence that you highlighted in your nightly package Sunday night. Some of the non sequiturs, I think, is the most generous way to describe them. This is from Jake Sherman on Trump's meeting with the House Republicans. Quote from Trump to House Republicans, close to exact quote, Nancy Pelosi's daughter is a wacko, said Trump. Her daughter told me if things were different, Nancy and I would be perfect together. There's an age difference, though. Jake went on, I don't know what this means, but this is what he told a group of House Rs. He talked about Silence of the Lambs famous villain, Hannibal Lecter. There was a lot of, I think his supporters call it riffing, but a lot of non-policy topics raised.
I've been covering Trump rallies for a while, and that's kind of a normal Trump rally, if I may. But perhaps House Republicans got to hear it up close up on Capitol Hill for the first time.
Like the VIP experience, kind of.
Right, a little bit more intimate.
Up next, we will be joined by the Biden campaign co-chair, Mitch Landrieu, and much more ahead. Don't go anywhere today.
It was bump stocks that resulted in 60 people being dead in Las Vegas, Nevada. And what the court did today is really rolling back what otherwise is important progress to be made to prevent gun violence in America.
Was Vice President Kamala Harris reacting to the nation's highest court in the land today deciding to roll back a ban on bump stocks. President Joe Biden, in a statement today, urging Congress to take action in the wake of the Supreme Court decision, saying this, quote, Americans should not have to live in fear of this mass devastation. We know thoughts and prayers are not enough. I call on Congress to ban bump stocks, to pass an assault weapon ban, and take additional action to save lives. Send me a bill, and I'll sign it immediately. Joining us, Biden-Harris re-election campaign co-chair, Mitch Landrieu is with us. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I, as you know, came out of Republican politics and Republican campaigns where the Supreme Court was an issue that animated Republicans. The Supreme Court is now out of step with majority Republican women and about half Republican men on issues like abortion and gun safety. How do you make sure that it's as motivating of an issue for the Democratic coalition and the Biden-Harris coalition as it was for 40 years for Republicans?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This decision today just is another kick in the gut. It's not a surprise. It shouldn't be for anybody that's watched what the MAGA wing of the Republican Party has tried to do with seizing power in state legislatures, the Congress, and yes, the Supreme Court. This is Donald Trump's Supreme Court. This is what a Supreme Court who wants to take America back again into the dark ages looks like, and it should cause people in America to shudder when you take it not only for what it said today, but take it in context. The decision today to basically make peaceful streets in America by putting a machine gun in everybody's hands is just something that's it's really just hard to fathom. The number of Americans that have been killed on American soil from gun violence since 1980 is over 1 million people. That's more American citizens that were killed in all of the wars that Americans fought in the 20th and the 21st century. And just sit on that for a second. And of course, Clarence Thomas thinks that the best way to deal with that is to just give everybody a machine gun. Now, you saw what the president said, you saw what the vice president said, but here's the most important message. This election is going to be a choice between a guy named Joe Biden, who gets up every day fighting for the American people, who passed the largest gun safety measure in the history of the country, who has tried to fund the police. Trump has tried to defund the police, and will appoint Supreme Court justices that reflect the ideas of America and hold true to the Constitution in a way that thoughtful judges should. This court has demonstrated in the last couple of months how they are so willing to eviscerate the rights, from Dobbs to the redistricting decision that they made the other day, and now to this incredible legislation. So there is a much bigger picture here. And if you want more of Clarence Thomas and Alito, then you vote for Trump. If you want a very thoughtful, reasonable court, the kind of court that Joe Biden has presided over for the years that he's been both the senator or vice president and now the president, then you have to pick Joe Biden. But it really is a very sad, sad, sad decision that's tortured in its language and its reasoning from Justice Thomas.
It's just listening to you. It's so interesting. I mean, the polls support everything you just said. You know, the vast majority, 85% of Americans support gun safety measures. I think it's even higher than that on bump stocks specifically. I think it's closer to 90-something. I think 83 is the number that supports background checks. The decision they have before them about domestic abusers. I mean, most women who are murdered by someone they know. The victims of the extreme right policies are everyone knows someone who either hasn't had access to health care they need. I mean, the women who are aligned with the campaign, who have been on my show talking about their experiences in Texas after abortion bans, are sort of living, walking, talking examples of how devastating Republican policies are. Do you think the race is close because people haven't focused in on the people in our own communities who are suffering and hurting because of the extreme Republican policies? Or do you think it's where we are on the calendar, that no one's thinking about it? And what is your theory of the state of the race?
Well, first of all, it's a close race, and it's going to be a close race all the way through Election Day. Everybody has known that. We've seen that in the past. But you could not have a more stark contrast between two visions of America. Joe Biden, really, everybody who knows him likes him. People who work for him want to continue to work for him. He has demonstrated an ability to cross the aisle and get massive pieces of legislation done. He's been very thoughtful and reasonable and respectful, by the way, of people that don't think like he does. On the infrastructure bill that I handled, he told me, you go everywhere and make sure everybody gets that money because I'm the president for all America. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has told you many, many, many times that I'm in this for myself. I'm going to seek retribution on people who oppose me. He went to the Hill the other day, which I have to tell you was disheartening and quite disgusting. To watch him walk into the Capitol Hill, a place where, as president, he sat and watched it get desecrated by an insurrection that he promoted. And what did the Republicans, the MAGA Republicans in Congress, do? Did they do what they said a couple of days after, Mitch McConnell and a couple of other senators? No, they embraced him. And you know what else they did? They gave him the game ball from that congressional race. Now, if that doesn't mean that Donald Trump now owns the Republican Party lock, stock, and barrel, and now he has this court that represents him, people should know he will continue to do what he said, which is being worse than he was the first time that he was president. So that's what this election's about. It's a very stark choice. We have to continue to talk to people. It's going to be a very close election. We're going to have to continue to tell them what the stakes are. But evidently, the Supreme Court and Congress are going to help them figure out really quickly what it really looks like when you take America back again, which is where Donald Trump wants to take us. And I don't think women want to go back. I don't think the minority communities want to go back. I don't think reasonable and thoughtful Americans want to go back to the way it was a long time ago when we did not share democracy in the United States of America. So we have to preserve it because it's on the line. Democracy is on the line. Freedom is on the line. Our rights are on the line. And, of course, the ability to actually live in a reasonable, thoughtful place with neighbors who are different from ourselves, all on the line. Joe Biden's going to protect it. Donald Trump is going to destroy it.
When we come back, with the conservative majority on the Supreme Court has already ushered in the all-out assault on reproductive rights in red states all across the country. One mom from Texas forced to flee her home and her home state for medical care will share her harrowing story after the break.
I was at risk of organ damage to my kidneys and brain, but I still wasn't dead enough for an exception for the abortion care in Texas. I was going to have to flee the state where my family has lived for 8 generations. And I was terrified. The bounty laws in Texas had us worrying about who could turn against us. Was it safer to attempt 12 hours in a car through rural Texas while I was violently ill? What if I got worse? Exceptions to abortion bans are a fiction. They don't exist in Texas, and I am living proof of that.
That was Lauren Miller testifying earlier today before a Senate subcommittee about the horror that she and countless women are being forced to endure every day after Donald Trump's handpicked Supreme Court justices stripped away a constitutional right for the first time ever. In attendance today was Caitlin Cash, who was also forced to leave her home state of Texas to get abortion care after she found out that her 13-week ultrasound that her baby was unlikely to survive until birth or would suffocate soon after being born. Caitlin's home state of Texas has been the leader in an effort to try and block women from leaving their homes, from leaving their states to receive abortion care. It's a movement which has been growing in anti-abortion states all across this country, therefore a reality for women all across our country. Caitlin Cash joins us now. Caitlin, I have to thank you for telling your story and for talking about these things. So many women have been through this. So few women are able to talk about it in their life, let alone on TV. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. It's a horrible thing to have to relive, but as I've been telling people and during my visit, if it's something I have to relive to let women know what it's really like in states with these bans, I'll keep doing it.
So tell us your story.
At my 13-week ultrasound, I found out that my second pregnancy, that there was a fetal abnormality. It was skeletal dysplasia. And so during that appointment, I was told that my child's bones would most likely start breaking in utero due to a condition called brittle bones. And then when my child was born, his rib cage would not be able to support normal lung function. And so he would most likely suffocate or need extreme medical intervention. And at that appointment, my doctor told me that I needed to start thinking about what type of end-of-life care I would want for my child. And it was a hard stop. And it never occurred to me that this was just 45 days after SB 8 went into effect in Texas, and that my doctor couldn't even say the word abortion.
So, Caitlin, you know from your doctor at 13 weeks that your baby that you want desperately, it sounds like it was a boy.
Yeah, it was a boy.
Is going to suffer. So there's no gray area. If he survives pregnancy, he will suffer. And your options in Texas are nothing. So then what happens?
So we talked in circles, and we kept saying, what can we do to help our baby? Like, what can we do as this baby's parents to help the suffering end? And we just didn't get anywhere. And so finally, the doctor looked at me and said, well, you should probably get a second opinion, but outside of Texas. And it was very clear what he was saying, which was we needed to leave the state. And so we walked out into the lobby, and at that moment, they handed me a big stack of papers, and it was my medical records. And they were saying, we can't transfer them anywhere. We can't tell you where to go. Good luck. And so on the same day that I was told that my son wouldn't survive, that this pregnancy, that from the moment that test turned positive, I had dreamed of this life. The same day I learned that, I was also told to go figure out where to get the health care that I needed. And I, went home and immediately fell to my bathroom floor sobbing because of this loss. And I had to pick up the phone and start calling clinics and trying to figure out, how do I get them my records? I don't have a scanner at home. Like, what do I do? And it was one of the most traumatic days of my life.
What happened next?
So we finally found a clinic, and we, were able, well, actually we found 2 clinics. And so there was some competing timelines, and there was a lot of, some states have waiting restrictions. And so I had to sign a lot of paperwork showing that I had read all of the concerns and that I knew how long. And then we had to book travel based on those wait times. And so I was finally able to find one clinic that could get me in, and we had to figure out what to do with my son, who was going to watch my dogs. What was I going to tell my employer? This, again, was 45 days after SB 8. I didn't want to put anyone else at risk for being caught trying to get me the care that I needed. And so we just left. My husband and I just left. We got on a plane, and we went out of state. And then I had to go to a clinic where they allow protesters, within a certain amount. And I walked past signs that told me I was a murderer. And as I went in to get basic health care to end my child's suffering.
And this wasn't your last brush with tragedy and the inability in the year 2023, right, to care for yourself and your unborn child. Tell us what happened next for you.
So after we returned, I kind of fell into a deep state of depression because I just was still having this really hard time processing the loss of my child and this whole thing being politicized and just kind of the conversations and things that were happening. But I was able to seek, mental health at my own resources, and I was able to get pregnant a few months later. I unfortunately miscarried that pregnancy. When I went to my doctor, I found out that my body was not processing that miscarriage on its own and that I would need mifepristone. I left my doctor's office, went to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist told me that they would need more indication from my doctor on why I needed this prescription. And I remember just turning around and walking out. Because I was actively miscarrying, I was actively bleeding, and I just said, yeah, I'm not doing this again. I was able to find a pharmacy that filled it. Then I got pregnant again, and I miscarried again. And after that, we chose IVF as our next best journey so that we could try to get a better medical understanding to what was happening. And I was fortunate that my IVF worked and I was able to get pregnant. And then 10 months later, I gave birth to my daughter. And I remember holding her on my chest thinking, it's over, we're fine, like, you're here, I can meet you. And my doctor told me that there was a problem, my placenta was not delivering, and that I needed to go to the OR to have a DNC to remove the remaining tissue. And then we waited, and we waited, and we waited. I started throwing up, I started shaking violently. They finally took me back to the OR. There was intense confusion. It was just chaotic, right? Not what you expect when they say, we're gonna take you back here for a very standard procedure. There was nurses running around, and as I'm laying there waiting for the procedure to start, I felt something on my arm dripping, and I grabbed a nurse and looked down, and I was actually bleeding from my IV. I was going into hemorrhagic shock, and I lost consciousness after that. I woke up sometime later and was told that I had lost half of my blood volume and that I should be grateful that I didn't lose my uterus. And after that, I was transferred to the ICU, and the first night of my daughter's life, I didn't get to spend it with her. I spent it in an ICU 3 floors away because they, for some reason, couldn't give me standard medical care for a postpartum hemorrhage.
Caitlin, you are so lucky to be alive. I know you know that. You are not alone in losing a baby you desperately wanted and wanting to end your son's suffering. You are not alone in needing health care after you delivered your daughter, but you are in a very, very small club of telling your story publicly of what so many women have endured privately. And I believe, I've said this to Amanda, I believe you and she and the others who are talking about your most painful, and in your case, your harrowing health moments, in Amanda's case, the very same. You're helping to change the country and change the trajectory of this moment in our history and saving other women, hopefully, from the same fate. I'm so happy for you and your daughter and your family, and I'm so grateful to you for telling your story. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I really hope that women take from this story that you don't know the reproductive care you're going to need until you need it. And it is all under attack. Emergency care, IVF, miscarriage management, everything is under attack right now. And the only person on the ballot this November that has pledged to get us those rights back is Joe Biden.
My friend and colleague Rachel Maddow joins us. We'll talk to her about everything happening in what she might describe as a news tsunami, and about the mental fitness and how we cover a convicted felon ex-president running to be president again.
The idea that there is an abstract rule of law or an abstract democracy that exists ambiently in the atmosphere, and someday, distantly in the future, we might lose it. It's not how this goes. The rule of law is mortal, right? It can be killed. It is wounded when the people involved in the judicial system and the adjudication of alleged crimes are being threatened and harassed and intimidated and pressured out of their jobs for doing that work.
The rule of law is mortal. What's more, it's under dire threat. That was my colleague, Rachel Maddow, building up to an interview with Fani Willis. It's something I've quoted multiple times. It'll make sense why I played it just now. Donald Trump has spent the better part of the last 8 years doing everything in his power to strip from the American people their confidence in all of our institutions. By his telling, our elections are rigged, verdicts are rigged, everything is rigged. In the long term, these attacks have an overwhelmingly corrosive and dangerous effect on the very foundations, the pillars of our democracy. And again, the rule of law is under attack. In Rachel's words, it needs to be protected. So it was heartening, seemed like maybe he was listening, when Attorney General Merrick Garland submitted to the Washington Post today an op-ed that served as something of a public warning. Quote, unfounded attacks on the Justice Department must end. And then after ticking through a series of recent conspiracy theories, falsehoods, and threats of violence, Garland insists such acts could cause real harm to the Department of Justice and to the men and women who help carry its mission. It was reminiscent of what he told the Republican-led House Judiciary Committee just last week.
Certain members of this committee and the Oversight Committee are seeking contempt as a means of obtaining for no legitimate purpose sensitive law enforcement information that could harm the integrity of future investigations. I will not be intimidated, and the Justice Department will not be intimidated.
These threats will not go away. They won't go away because of what he said or wrote. They won't go away in short order. In fact, if today proves anything, it's that even when the rule of law works out in a way that damages the current president, Trump's political adversary, and could actually benefit Trump politically, President Joe Biden's own son was convicted in a court of law. Many elements of the far right still insist that there's some conspiracy at play, that it's all a sham, that it's still rigged. Again, to Rachel's warning, the rule of law is mortal, and now it is up to all of us to protect it. Our friend and colleague, the host of The Rachel Maddow Show here on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow. She's also the host of the podcast Ultra, whose second season premiered just yesterday. The first episode is available. Rachel, it's such a heavy news cycle. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that if the Biden administration has weaponized the legal system of this country to only ever go after Republicans and conservatives and never go after Democrats, I think today proves that they're doing an absolutely terrible job of that. Boy, are they really falling down on the job, allowing the president's son not only to be prosecuted, but convicted, and then somehow manipulating President Joe Biden into saying, I respect the rule of law. No, I'm not pardoning my son. He may appeal, but we support him and respect the jury's verdict. Wow, that is really not what you would expect. We've also got, Bob Menendez on trial, Democratic senator. We've got Henry Cuellar, Democratic congressman who is criminally indicted and going on trial. The important thing about this is that it gives lie to the Republican critique, to the Trump screed, that there's something about the justice system that is skewed against them and is designed to help Democrats. I mean, I think we know in our heads that hasn't been a good faith critique, but a day like today should disprove it, right? If they were arguing on a rational basis that was based on facts. It's not based on facts. It's just designed as an attack against the American system of government because they're running against the American system of government. And it is really not about the facts of any individual case, including those against Trump.
I mean, I think that my habit that I'm determined to break in this election cycle is to stop looking for the circuit breaker or the thing that breaks the fever, right? I immediately went over to conservative media to see did we get them, right? Did we show them? Do they believe now that the rule of law is a real thing and not what you just described? And it didn't. And I was disappointed again. And I want to stop asking the wrong questions. And I feel like so much of what we have to get right this time, because way too much is on the line, is that the question isn't, did some on the right finally become persuaded that the rule of law is a real thing? And not only do we have to protect it, but it treats everyone fairly because, look, Joe Biden stood by as his son was convicted by a jury of his peers, and he said, no, he won't pardon him. The question is, was it all a projection, right? And I wonder what you think, what you take from this, that there is no equivalence. There is no need to seek out symmetry and both siderism because the right isn't asking the same questions. They're not having the same conversation.
Yeah, there's a reason that, that Donald Trump and supporters of Trump have been immune to fact-checking over the past 5 to 8 years, or 9 years, I guess now. It's because they don't care about being wrong, right? This isn't a fact-based appeal that they are making to people. They're trying to make you feel like America is in an emergency, that America is under existential attack from evil people who must be destroyed by any means necessary. There is an enemy within, and we're in such dire straits as a country that we need to get rid of our system of government, get rid of all this process, get rid of all these different people having a say, get rid of all these safeguards and checks and balances, and instead just have somebody who's going to slay the demon, just have somebody who's going to vanquish our enemies once and for all. And if you're going to make that kind of a case, you're not making it based on the observable facts in the world, where you're horrified if you're found to be wrong and then you correct it, or new facts arrive that disprove what you had previously been saying, and so you course correct. it's not about the fact of what they are asserting. It's about the fight. They want the fight. And so it puts, those of us who are sort of still living in a reason-based world at a disadvantage, because you can't bring reason to a fight with somebody who's not trying to actually rationally persuade you. They're just trying to upset you. But I still think that's what we have to do, right? I mean, I don't think we should expect the Trumpian right and the Trumpian Republican Party to be persuaded by new facts, but we should continue to report and describe and contextualize responsibly the actual facts of the world, in the hopes that the crazy-making, conspiratorial, fact-free stuff that they are selling will ultimately have fewer buyers in the larger public, right? You can't move Mike Johnson, you can't move Kash Patel, you can't move Laura Trump or whatever her name is. You're not going to move these people with rational argument, let alone Trump himself, right? But maybe somebody who doesn't pay that much attention to politics and hears all this bluster from the right will also hear the facts from you and from responsible news organizations, and they'll recognize that what they're trying to sell is a bunch of bunk, and maybe they won't vote for it. I mean, it's unromantic, but that's the task. Like, stay wedded to the truth, keep confronting them and contradicting them when they are wrong, and pointing out true things, and believe the best of our fellow citizens.
This has been Primetime Weekend. I'm Nicole Wallace. Please tune into Deadline White House and all of our primetime shows weekdays on MSNBC.